For over 8,000 years, the Carvax Dominion had ruled the spiral arm without challenge. Civilizations rose beneath its shadow the way forests rose beneath mountains. Quietly, inevitably, and eventually, they disappeared. Some species surrendered after seeing the first Dominion warships enter orbit above their worlds. Others resisted. Resistance changed nothing. The outcome was always the same. The Dominion arrived. The Dominion conquered. The Dominion endured. At the center of the Dominion capital world stood the Hall of Ascension, a structure so massive that clouds formed around its upper towers during the cold season. Entire sections had been carved directly into the Black Mountains beneath the capital plateau thousands of years earlier when the Dominion was still young and believed monuments should outlive stars. Deep within that structure existed a chamber forbidden to almost everyone in the Empire. The Chamber of Victories. The walls were made from volcanic stone polished smooth enough to reflect light like dark water. And on those walls were names. 172 of them. Each carved by hand. Each filled with liquid gold. Each representing a civilization that no longer truly existed. The names stretched around the chamber in enormous concentric circles. Some were ancient enough that few living beings remembered the species behind them. Others were recent, fresh, still shining brightly beneath the chamber lights. At the center of the room stood Supreme Commander Valor Crass. Nearly 3 meters tall, wrapped in ceremonial armor forged from layered black alloy, Crass looked less like a living creature and more like a statue built to represent conquest itself. He was old even by Dominion standards. 941 years. He had commanded 39 planetary invasions, 12 interstellar suppression campaigns, 4 extinction operations. He had never lost. Not once. Every morning before military briefings began, Crass walked the Chamber of Victories alone. It was ritual, reflection, reminder. He started at the first conquered species and walked slowly toward the most recent name added only 3 years earlier after the collapse of the Thalen Combine. He always stopped at the same place afterward. The empty black stone beyond the final name. Space for more. There was always space for more. That morning, the silence of the chamber broke behind him. Supreme Commander. Crass did not turn immediately. Only one type of interruption was permitted during the morning walk. Important news. The officer approaching wore deep space reconnaissance markings across his silver uniform. Young. Nervous. Trying very hard not to sound nervous. Crass finally turned. Report. The officer activated a holographic display between them. A star system appeared in pale blue light. Single yellow star. 8 planets. 1 highlighted in green and blue. Exploration Fleet Sigma 9 has completed survey operations in Sector 14. Crass studied the hologram silently. Life-bearing world confirmed, the officer continued. Industrial civilization. Pre-expansion phase. Species designation, human. Crass said nothing. The officer continued carefully. They call their world Earth. The hologram zoomed closer. Cloud-covered oceans. Night-side city lights. Orbital satellites. Primitive compared to Dominion infrastructure. But active. Alive. Population. Approximately 8.2 billion. Colonies. Minor scientific outposts within their own system. No confirmed extrasolar expansion. A faint rumbling sound escaped Crass. The Dominion equivalent of amusement. 1 world, he said quietly. Yes, Supreme Commander. Crass stepped closer to the hologram. Human orbital stations rotated slowly above the planet. Small. Fragile. Nothing resembling serious military infrastructure. What of their fleet? The officer hesitated. Their largest military vessels are chemically propelled carrier platforms with limited fusion capability. No faster-than-light travel. No planetary shield systems. No confirmed anti-capital weaponry. The silence stretched. Crass examined the planet carefully. Blue oceans. White storm systems. Continents glowing softly beneath darkness. Beautiful worlds were often easier to conquer. Their populations feared destruction more. Military culture? The officer inhaled slowly. This is unusual. Crass looked at him. Explain. Our analysts recovered extensive historical records from their planetary networks. Humanity is highly conflict-oriented internally. Their recorded history contains continuous warfare across nearly every era of development. The holographic display changed. Wars. Explosions. Primitive aircraft. Armored vehicles. Nuclear detonations. Cities burning. Human soldiers charging through smoke and mud. They fought this way before reaching space? Krass asked. Yes. How long? The officer looked at the data again. Most of their recorded civilization. Krass watched ancient footage of humans climbing from shattered trenches under artillery fire. Primitive. Savage. Determined. Interesting. They nearly destroyed themselves multiple times, the officer continued. Environmental collapse. Nuclear standoffs. Resource wars. Civil conflicts. And yet they survived. Yes, Supreme Commander. Krass folded his hands behind his back. A violent species trapped on a single world. The officer nodded. Our analysts believe they are entering a period of planetary unification. Several global defense treaties already exist. Krass stared at Earth for a long moment. Then he slowly turned toward the empty space on the wall beyond the 172nd name. The black stone waited silently. Patiently. The officer finally asked the question he had been holding since entering the chamber. Will the council be informed? Krass looked at the empty wall. Yes. His voice was calm. Certain. Prepare the High Council. The officer bowed immediately. And the humans, Supreme Commander? Krass studied the glowing image of Earth one final time. Then he spoke the words that had preceded the fall of 172 civilizations. Add space for another name. The High Council assembled 40 hours later beneath the black domes of the Hall of Ascension. 17 seats circled the chamber. 17 of the most powerful beings in the Carvax Dominion. Fleet admirals. Military strategists. Governors of conquered systems. Architects of extinction campaigns. And at the head of them all sat Supreme Commander Valor Krass. The holographic image of Earth rotated silently above the center of the chamber. Small. Low. Insignificant. Counselor Thex was the first to laugh. A single-world species? His silver eyes narrowed with amusement. They have not even escaped their own star system. Several others exchanged similar expressions. Not arrogance exactly. Certainty. The kind built across thousands of years without defeat. Krass allowed the silence to continue before speaking. Survey analysis. A tactical officer stepped forward immediately. Humanity possesses no faster-than-light capability. No interstellar colonies. No confirmed deep space military production. The hologram shifted. Human warships appeared beside Dominion vessels for scale comparison. The difference was absurd. One Dominion patrol cruiser outweighed an entire human carrier group. Some council members visibly relaxed further after seeing it. Primary weapons? Admiral Vorin asked. Projectile systems. Nuclear missiles. Experimental directed energy platforms still under development. Another counselor made a low dismissive sound. Primitive. Yes, the analyst admitted carefully. But unusually adaptable. Krass noticed several council members glance toward him. They had learned over centuries that analysts rarely used words carelessly. Clarify, Krass said. The display changed again. Human battle footage filled the chamber. Wars across different centuries. Different continents. Different uniforms. But always the same species. Fighting. Surviving. Adapting. Humanity's technological advancement accelerated rapidly during periods of extreme conflict, the analyst explained. They improve fastest under pressure. Nuclear detonations flashed across the chamber. Cities burning beneath mushroom clouds. Human soldiers still advancing through radioactive ash. They survived this? One governor asked. Yes. Another scene appeared. Global pandemics. Economic collapses. Civil unrest. Climate disasters. Yet the population graphs kept recovering. Again. And again. And again. Their species demonstrates unusually high resilience patterns, the analyst continued. Historical models suggest humans respond to existential threats with accelerated innovation and decentralized resistance structures. Resistance changes nothing, Admiral Vorin said flatly. No, Krass replied quietly. The chamber became still. Because when the Supreme Commander interrupted someone, people listened. Krass stood slowly from his seat and approached the hologram. Earth rotated before him. Fragile-looking. Deceptively peaceful. How many civilizations have we conquered that believe themselves resilient? He asked. No one answered immediately. The number was obvious. All of them. Krass continued staring at Earth. Overconfidence is the only enemy that has ever endangered this empire. The younger council members straightened slightly. The older ones remained silent. They remembered past campaigns. Remembered worlds that had fought harder than expected. Remembered fleets lost because commanders assumed victory too early. Counselor Thex folded his arms. With respect, Supreme Commander, caution is wise. But this species cannot threaten the Dominion. No, Crass agreed. Not now. The room quieted again. The distinction mattered. The tactical officer activated another display. Human population centers appeared across Earth. Resource projections are exceptional, he said. Water reserves abundant. Mineral extraction capacity high. Industrial growth accelerating. Projected surrender timeline? Admiral Voran asked. The analyst checked his display. Estimated full compliance, 4 to 9 days after orbital demonstration. Several council members smiled faintly. Routine. Predictable. Another conquest. Crass remained expressionless. What of their psychology? The analyst hesitated again. Humanity demonstrates unusually emotional behavioral structures. Strong tribal loyalty. Strong pack bonding. Irrational persistence under hopeless conditions. Irrational? One counselor repeated. Yes. The hologram shifted once more. Ancient human battle recordings appeared. Outnumbered soldiers charging impossible positions. Civilian resistance movements. Emergency workers running into collapsing buildings. Humans sacrificing themselves for strangers. Again. And again. And again. The analyst looked uncomfortable. They continue fighting even after strategic defeat becomes mathematically certain. The chamber watched silently. Crass studied the footage carefully. Not the weapons. Not the tactics. The faces. Fear. Pain. Exhaustion. And still moving forward. Interesting. Very interesting. Finally, Admiral Voran spoke again. Then we break them quickly. The statement carried simple military logic. Shock and awe. Overwhelming force. End resistance before it organizes. Standard Dominion doctrine. Crass slowly turned back toward the council. How many ships are required? 10 would be excessive, Voran replied immediately. 5 could pacify the system. Several counselors nodded. Crass remained silent long enough to make them uncomfortable. Then, 40. The chamber looked up sharply. Supreme Commander? Thex asked carefully. A full battle fleet, Crass said calmly. 4 dreadnoughts. Carrier support. Ground occupation forces. Even the older counselors looked surprised now. For a species without interstellar capability? Voran asked. Crass looked directly at him. The unknown deserves respect. Silence. Then slowly. The older commanders nodded. They understood. The younger officers did not yet. But they would. Eventually. Crass returned to his seat. Fleet Commander selection? One name appeared immediately above the chamber table. Commander Rail Drath. Veteran of 4 campaigns. 0 recorded defeats. Strategic specialization. Adaptive battlefield suppression. A lean figure appeared in holographic military profile. Cold eyes. Controlled posture. Precise service history. Counselor Thex exhaled softly. Drath is excessive for this assignment. No, Crass said. He is appropriate. The chamber fell quiet again. Because now they understood. This was not merely another conquest. This would become history. The first contact between the Dominion and humanity. And if history remembered the moment, Crass intended it to remember perfection. The final vote was unanimous. 40 warships. 12,000 ground troops. Full occupation authority. Fleet Commander Rail Drath in command. As the council adjourned, Crass remained seated alone in the darkening chamber. Earth still rotated silently above the table. Tiny. Vulnerable. Easy. And yet something about the planet bothered him in a way he could not fully explain. Perhaps it was the humans themselves. A species that had survived its own violence for hundreds of thousands of years. A species born in chaos. Crass stared at the hologram a little longer. Then quietly spoke to the empty chamber. Let us see, he murmured. What survival has taught them. The signal reached Earth 16 days before the Dominion fleet crossed the outer edge of the solar system. It arrived quietly. Not as a transmission meant for humans. Not a message. Not a threat. Just energy. Artificial. Structured. Moving. The first detection came from listening array Kilo 7 beyond Neptune orbit. At first, the automated systems classified it as background distortion. Then the pattern repeated. Again. 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 A machine-generated rhythm hidden beneath cosmic radiation. 3 minutes later, the alert reached Lunar Defense Command. 21 minutes later, it reached the deepest military facility on Earth. A place officially non-existent. The Bastion. Buried beneath the Swiss Alps nearly 400 meters underground, the Bastion served as the command center for the unified Earth defense network. Very few people on Earth knew it existed. Even fewer knew why it had been built. Director Amelia Reyes stood in silence as the tactical display illuminated before her. She was 52 years old with iron-gray hair cut short for practicality and the calm expression of someone who had spent most of her life preparing for terrible things. A young analyst looked up nervously. "We confirmed the signal origin 6 minutes ago." "How far?" Reyes asked. "Approximately 13 light hours beyond the heliopause." The room was silent except for keyboards and low machine hums. A red marker moved slowly across the tactical display toward the center of the solar system. Toward Earth. Reyes stared at it for a long moment. Then, "How many?" The analyst hesitated. "Energy signatures suggest fleet scale." Nobody spoke after that, because every person in the room understood what fleet scale meant. General Noah Kane entered moments later wearing a partially fastened combat uniform. He looked exhausted already. "What do we know?" Reyes handed him the tablet without speaking. Kane read the report once, then again slower. His expression hardened. "After all these years?" he murmured. Reyes nodded once. Yes. Neither of them needed further explanation, because both remembered the discovery that had changed human history forever. 11 years earlier, humanity had intercepted a signal from deep space. Ancient, fragmented, damaged, a warning broadcast from a dead civilization. The final transmission of a species called the Illyrians. Most of the message had been corrupted, but the surviving portions contained enough. Descriptions of warships, conquest patterns, fleet structures, an empire moving systematically across the galaxy consuming civilizations one by one. And one repeated phrase found throughout the dying transmission: "They always come." Humanity never released the full truth publicly. Officially, the signal had been classified as inconclusive extraterrestrial data. Unofficially, Earth had spent 11 years preparing for invasion. Reyes walked slowly around the tactical table. Confirmed trajectory. The analysts worked quickly. Seconds later. Course projection unchanged. Direct intercept path toward inner system. No communication attempts? None. General Kane folded his arms. "They found us." The words settled heavily across the room. Not fear. Confirmation. Humanity had always known this day might come. Now it had. Reyes finally looked toward the far end of the command center. "Wake the Black Archive." Several analysts immediately froze. One technician actually looked up from his station in shock. General Kane stared at Reyes carefully. "Amelia." "We always said if the signal came," she replied calmly, "we stopped pretending." Kane held her gaze for several long seconds, then nodded once. Within minutes, encrypted authorization codes spread through hidden military networks across Earth. Buried bunkers opened. Dormant facilities activated. Deep space stations powered online. Classified manufacturing arrays beneath the Pacific Ocean awakened from standby mode. Across the planet, thousands of systems began moving quietly for the first time in years. And above all of it, ordinary civilians remained unaware. In Buenos Aires, people drank coffee beside crowded streets. In Lagos, trains moved through the morning rush. In Tokyo, children walked to school beneath glowing advertisements. The world still felt normal. For now. Deep beneath the Alps, however, the illusion had ended. Reyes entered a secure elevator alongside Kane in complete silence. The elevator descended far below the main Bastion command levels. Past military operations. Past planetary defense coordination. Past sections of the facility most governments did not know existed. Finally, the doors opened. A second command chamber waited beyond them. Smaller. Darker. Far more heavily secured. At the center stood a circular holographic table displaying thousands of tiny inactive markers spread across the solar system. Kane exhaled slowly. Still strange seeing it all together. Reyes nodded faintly. 11 years of preparation. 11 years of hidden construction. 11 years of lies. Project Orpes. Humanity's real defense plan. Not warships. Not planetary shields. Not fleets. Something else. Something designed specifically from the fragments of Illyrian data humanity had managed to decode. Dr. Elias Vey entered the chamber moments later carrying a tablet against his chest. Small. Thin. Messy dark hair. He looked more like a sleep-deprived professor than the architect of humanity's most secret weapons system. "You received the signal," Reyes said. Yes. Can ORPUs function? Vey was quiet for a moment. Then, the real answer? Reyes nodded. He looked toward the holographic markers floating above the table. 3,126 hidden units, distributed throughout the solar system, waiting silently for over a decade. We built ORPUS based on incomplete alien physics, Vey admitted. The simulations say it works. The math says it works. But we've never tested it against a real fleet. The silence returned. Kane finally asked the question none of them wanted answered. If it fails? Vey looked at the tactical display above them. The approaching red markers. 40 enemy warships. Then quietly. Then humanity dies conventionally. Nobody responded to that. Because there was nothing to say. Reyes folded her hands behind her back. When do they arrive? Outer system boundary in 16 days. She nodded once. Then we begin full activation. Vey looked at her carefully. All of it? Yes. Kane stared at the dormant ORPUS markers floating above the table. What about public disclosure? Reyes thought for several seconds. Not yet. People deserve to know. No, she replied softly. They deserve time. Far beyond the solar system, the Dominion fleet continued advancing through dark space with absolute confidence. On Earth, humanity quietly prepared for the war it had feared for 11 years. And deep beneath the mountains, Project ORP slowly began to wake up. Fleet Commander Rael Dract reviewed the invasion plan alone. That was his habit before campaigns. No advisors. No officers. No distractions. Only data. The command chamber aboard the Dominion flagship Eternal Dominion stretched around him in cold metallic silence while holographic projections rotated slowly above the tactical table. Human military infrastructure. Orbital defense positions. Industrial centers. Population density maps. Everything the Dominion survey teams had gathered. Drax studied it all carefully. Not because humanity impressed him, but because underestimating enemies was how commanders died. Outside the massive observation viewport, 40 Dominion warships moved through faster-than-light transit formation like dark mountains sliding through distorted space. 4 dreadnoughts, 12 heavy cruisers, carrier platforms, suppression destroyers, troop transports. Enough military power to erase civilizations. The fleet moved with the confidence of something that had done this many times before. Because it had. Commander Dract stood motionless beneath the tactical glow. Tallly. Emotionally controlled to the point of discomfort for many officers beneath his command. He had won every campaign of his career through one simple philosophy. Assume the enemy has something you do not understand yet. It had kept him alive. A younger officer entered the chamber carefully. Fleet Commander. Dract did not look away from Earth. Report. Transit remains stable. Arrival at outer system boundary in 6 hours. Dract nodded faintly. Any anomalies? The officer hesitated slightly. A few sensor distortions near the inner system. Long range only. Analysis teams currently classify them as low-energy interference patterns. Cause? Unknown. Dract finally turned. Unknown is not a cause. The officer straightened immediately. Our current assumption is naturally occurring interference. Dract walked slowly toward the tactical display. The highlighted distortions appeared scattered throughout the solar system. Thousands of faint signatures. Tiny. Barely visible. Easy to ignore. His eyes narrowed slightly. Have they moved? No. Changed? No, Fleet Commander. Dract studied the readings silently. Then. Continue monitoring them. Yes, sir. The officer left quickly afterward. Dract remained alone. Something about the distortions bothered him. Not because they looked threatening. Because they looked intentional. And intentional things mattered. Especially before invasions. Hours later, the fleet emerged from faster-than-light transit beyond the outer edge of the solar system. The yellow star of Sol burned brightly ahead. And there, on Earth, small from this distance, blue and white against darkness. Beautiful. Fragile-looking. Dract immediately ordered full-spectrum scans. The sensor data flooded the command deck within minutes. One inhabited world. Minor orbital defenses. Limited military fleet positions. No hidden armadas. No large-scale planetary shields. No visible weapons capable of threatening a Dominion battle group. Exactly as the surveys predicted. Yet the strange energy distortions remained. Thousands of them. Still inactive. Still spread across the system. Still impossible to classify. Tactical analysis? Dract asked. His senior sensor officer leaned over the display. Minimal power output individually. Some resemble dormant satellites or debris fields. Some? The officer swallowed carefully. Others do not fit any known structure pattern. Dract folded his hands behind his back. Yeah. Intentional. Interesting. He turned toward the main viewport. The fleet reflected faintly across the glass. 40 warships suspended against endless stars. Unstoppable. A younger captain standing nearby finally spoke what several officers were clearly thinking. With respect, Fleet Commander, this system barely possesses orbital defense capability. Dract looked at him. And? The captain hesitated. This operation appears straightforward. The command deck became very quiet, because everyone knew Dract disliked careless confidence. Finally he spoke. Do you know why the Dominion survives? The captain answered immediately. Superior military capability. No. Dract's voice remained calm. The Dominion survives because it studies enemies before dismissing them. Silence. Then Dract looked back toward Earth. A species that survives long enough reaches space for a reason. Nobody responded. Because suddenly the campaign felt slightly less simple than it had moments earlier. Dract activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All vessels maintain battle-ready status. No deviations from tactical protocol. Acknowledgements flooded back instantly. Precise. Disciplined. Professional. The Dominion fleet advanced slowly toward the inner system. Toward Earth. Toward humanity. And deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Director Amelia Reyes watched them arrive. The Bastion Command Center operated at maximum capacity now. Thousands of personnel. Hundreds of tactical displays. Global communication streams. Defense readiness updates. The giant tactical screen dominated the room. 40 red markers advancing inward. Steady. Confident. Predictable. General Kane stood beside Reyes. They're exactly on the projected invasion path. Good, Reyes replied quietly. Dr. Vey approached carrying activation reports. ORPUS network now at 83% synchronization. Any instability? Minor latency spikes near Jupiter positions. We're correcting them. Reyes nodded. On another display, civilians across Earth watched official government broadcasts. The truth had finally been released 3 hours earlier. Humanity was not alone. And something was coming. Panic had erupted in some cities. Riots in others. But surprisingly, most people simply watched. Quiet. Focused. Humanity had spent thousands of years imagining monsters from the sky. Now the monsters were real. And somehow that made the fear simpler. More honest. A communications officer suddenly looked up. Incoming transmission. The room fell silent instantly. The signal spread across every major receiver on Earth simultaneously. Televisions. Military networks. Civilian satellites. Phones. Emergency systems. Then the translation algorithm activated. A deep alien voice filled the bastion. Cold. Measured. Emotionless. To the inhabitants of Earth. The Dominion emblem appeared across every screen. You are addressed by Fleet Commander Rael Dract of the Carvax Dominion. The room listened in silence. The Dominion controls 172 conquered civilizations across this region of the galaxy. Your species has been evaluated and found within Dominion expansion territory. The giant red fleet markers continued moving slowly toward Earth. You are offered one opportunity. The alien voice never changed tone. Surrender peacefully and your species will be integrated into the Dominion. Pause. Refuse. The tactical display zoomed slowly toward Earth. And your military capability will be destroyed by force. Silence filled the bastion afterward. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally General Kane exhaled quietly. Well, he muttered. They certainly sound confident. Reyes kept watching the approaching fleet. Then calmly gave the order humanity had spent 11 years preparing to hear. Send the response. The communications officer looked at her carefully. The final version? Yes. The officer nodded and transmitted it across the void. Minutes later, aboard the Eternal Dominion, Fleet Commander Dract received Earth's reply. He read it once, then again more slowly. The message was short. Professional. Come. Fleet Commander Dract. Your message has been received and understood. Humanity does not intend to surrender. We advise your fleet to reconsider further advancement into the inner system. This is not hostility. It is a warning. Dract stared at the final line for several long seconds, then quietly asked, "Do they understand who we are?" No one answered, because the strange thing about the human response was not its defiance, it was its certainty. Fleet Commander Rael Dract did not immediately respond to humanity's message. Instead he reread it 3 times. Not because the words were complicated, because the tone was wrong. Every civilization reacted differently when facing the Dominion. Some begged, some threatened, some tried diplomacy, some panicked. But beneath all of it there was always the same emotional pattern: fear. Humanity's message lacked fear entirely. That bothered him more than the refusal itself. This is not hostility. It is a warning. Dract stood motionless on the command deck while the fleet advanced deeper into the solar system. The yellow star burned brighter ahead now. Earth visible even without magnification. Blue oceans. White storms. Cloud-covered continents turning peacefully through darkness. Behind him, tactical officers monitored fleet positioning in disciplined silence. Finally Dract spoke. "Update on the anomalous signatures." The sensor officer immediately activated a display. Thousands of tiny markers appeared across the inner system. Still inactive. Still motionless. Still difficult to classify. "We've identified approximately 3,000 individual signatures," the officer reported. "Distributed between asteroid fields, orbital lanes, and outer planetary positions. Power source: minimal. Construction: unknown." Dract narrowed his eyes slightly. Unknown again. Too many unknowns. A younger tactical analyst stepped forward nervously. "With respect, Fleet Commander, even if the signatures are artificial, their energy output is insignificant compared to Dominion shield systems." Dract looked at him calmly. "And what happens when an enemy wants you to underestimate something?" The analyst hesitated. Silence answered for him. Dract turned back toward the display. "Continue analysis." "Yes, sir." The fleet continued advancing. Perfect formation. 40 warships moving with overwhelming precision. On Earth, the Bastion Command Center watched them approach in absolute silence. The tactical screen glowed red. 40 enemy vessels. Closing steadily. General Kane stood with folded arms beside Director Reyes. They ignored the warning. Reyes nodded faintly. They were always going to. Dr. Elias Vey worked across 3 holographic displays simultaneously nearby. Equations moved rapidly through the air around him. Spatial geometry. Synchronization models. Targeting lattices. The mathematics behind ORPTUS looked less like military engineering and more like controlled insanity. "Synchronization?" Reyes asked. 97%. "Any failures?" 2 relay units near Saturn are lagging behind network timing. "Can you fix it?" "I already am." Kane stared at the giant tactical display. "Hard to believe this is really happening." Reyes understood what he meant. For 11 years, invasion had existed only as preparation. Theory. Planning. Fear. Now 40 alien warships were physically moving toward Earth. Real. Visible. Close. A communications officer looked up suddenly. "Civilian global response stabilizing." Reyes glanced toward the report. Riots had slowed. Emergency shelters filling. Military reserves mobilizing worldwide. And surprisingly, recruitment numbers climbing rapidly. Kane noticed it too. "They're volunteering." "Humans always do when cornered," Reyes replied quietly. Outside the Bastion, the world had changed overnight. In New York, giant screens displayed evacuation instructions beside alien fleet projections. In Cairo, civilians lined up calmly for underground shelter transport. In Seoul, factories shifted into emergency production cycles. Across the internet, billions of people watched the same terrifying reality together. Humanity had finally found something larger than itself. And instead of collapsing, it was focusing. The Bastion lights dimmed slightly as deeper defense systems activated beneath the facility. A low vibration rolled through the command center. ORPUS awakening further. Dr. Vey looked up from his calculations. "They're entering optimal engagement range in 6 hours." Nobody responded immediately. 6 hours until humanity discovered whether 11 years of preparation meant survival or extinction. Far beyond Earth orbit, Dract continued studying the strange network signatures. The more data he reviewed, the less he liked them. Because the pattern distribution made no military sense. The objects were too dispersed for conventional defense coordination. Too numerous for satellites. Too small for warships. And yet positioned with unmistakable intentionality. Fleet Commander, the sensor officer interrupted carefully. We're detecting low-level communication bursts between the signatures. Drac turned instantly. Communication. Yes, sir. The officer enlarged the data stream. Thousands of tiny pulses flickered across the display. Constant. Organized. Synchronized. Not random. Drac felt the first real warning instinct of the campaign settle quietly into his mind. Can we decode them? No known language structure. It appears machine-based. Another officer frowned. A distributed sensor network? Possibly, the tactical analyst admitted. Drac remained silent, then slowly asked, why would a pre-interstellar civilization build a solar system-wide machine network? Nobody answered. Because nobody had a good answer. The command deck grew increasingly quiet. Outside the viewport, the fleet continued moving toward Earth, toward the waiting inner system, toward 3,000 silent machines. Drac finally activated the fleet-wide officer channel. All vessels elevate combat readiness to maximum. Several officers looked surprised. One younger captain spoke carefully. Fleet Commander, current threat projections remain minimal. Drac looked directly at him. Minimal threats still kill careless commanders. Silence followed. Then acknowledgement signals spread across the fleet. Weapons charged. Shield systems strengthened. Formation tightened. The Dominion warships prepared for battle. On Earth, humanity watched them do it. Inside the Bastion, a young analyst stared at the tactical display with widening eyes. Director. Reyes turned. What? The analyst pointed shakily toward the ORPUS network display. Thousands of dormant markers had begun glowing brighter. One by one. Across the entire solar system. Like stars waking up. Dr. Vey's face changed immediately. No. He moved rapidly toward the console. Kane frowned. What is it? Vey stared at the data flooding across his screen. Then slowly looked up. They've started scanning aggressively. Reyes understood instantly. They found the network. Not fully, Vey replied carefully. But they know something is there now. The room became still. Because everyone understood what that meant. The moment of hiding was over. General Kane looked toward Reyes. Do we activate early? Reyes stared at the advancing fleet markers. 40 enemy warships. Still approaching. Still confident. Still unaware of what ORPUS actually was. Then she quietly gave the order that would decide the fate of Earth. Wake the network. Across the solar system. 3,000 hidden machines opened their eyes simultaneously. Fleet Commander Rael Drac felt it before the sensors confirmed it. A shift. Subtle. Mathematical. The solar system itself suddenly seemed active. Report, he said immediately. The command deck erupted into motion around him. Sensor officers leaned over displays. Data streams accelerated across holographic screens. Then the tactical officer looked up slowly. The anomalous signatures. Drac stepped toward the display. What about them? The officer swallowed. They've powered up. Across the tactical map, 3,000 tiny markers burned bright red simultaneously. Not random. Not staggered. Perfect synchronization. The entire command deck went silent. Power readings climbed rapidly across the display. 100%. 200. 500. Still climbing. Another officer spoke sharply. They're linked. Drac turned. Clarify. Every unit is communicating with every other unit simultaneously. Shared coordination frequency. Shared targeting synchronization. The tactical display zoomed outward automatically. 3,000 separate objects. One unified system. Drac's eyes narrowed slightly. Interesting. Very interesting. How much power? The sensor officer hesitated. That's the problem, Fleet Commander. Drac looked at him calmly. What problem? The individual outputs are small. Then why are you concerned? Because the combined network output is increasing exponentially. Silence spread slowly across the command deck. Outside the viewport, tiny lights began appearing throughout the solar system. Thousands of them. Like artificial stars turning on in the dark. Drac stared at them for several seconds. Then activated fleet-wide communications. All ships. Shields to maximum. Weapons hot. Maintain battle formation. Acknowledgements flooded back instantly. 40 Dominion warships tightened formation. Heavy shields illuminated across their hulls in glowing blue waves. Weapons arrays rotated outward. The Dominion prepared for conventional war. And that was their mistake. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, the Bastion Command Center stood completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved unnecessarily. Every eye remained locked onto the ORPUS network display. 3,126 active units. Fully synchronized. For 11 years humanity had hidden them throughout the solar system disguised as mining debris, abandoned satellites, deep space probes, asteroid fragments, dead communication relays. Waiting. Patiently. Dr. Elias Vey stood motionless beside the activation console. His hands trembled slightly now. Not from fear. From reality. After 11 years of theory, ORPUS was alive. General Kane stared at the tactical display. They still think this is a fleet battle. Reyes answered quietly. That's because nobody's ever taught them otherwise. The countdown appeared above the main screen. Engagement window, 1:14. 1 minute. 14 seconds. The Dominion fleet continued advancing. Drax watched the glowing network spread across the inner system like an enormous invisible web finally revealing itself. Tactical prediction? A senior analyst answered carefully. Unknown. The word irritated several officers immediately. The Dominion hated unknowns. Drax did not. Unknowns were honest. Overconfidence was dangerous. What are the units targeting? He asked. We cannot determine lock patterns yet. The lights across the system brightened further. And suddenly, Drax understood something terrifying. The machines were not aiming at individual ships. They were aiming at positions. At the space between vessels. Fleet Commander. The sensor officer's voice cracked slightly. Spatial distortion readings detected. Every Dominion officer looked up instantly. The display warped. Space itself bent briefly near the front of the fleet formation. Tiny distortions. Localized. Wrong. Drax's instincts screamed immediately. Evasive maneuvers. 40 warships shifted formation with astonishing precision. Too late. The first Dominion destroyer vanished. Not exploded. Not damaged. Vanished. One moment it existed. The next, empty space. No debris. No heat bloom. No wreckage. Nothing. The command deck froze. Even the computers hesitated for nearly half a second before updating the tactical display. Destroyed. Silence. Absolute silence. Drax stared at the empty position where the destroyer had been. What happened? Nobody answered immediately. Because nobody understood what they had just seen. A tactical officer finally whispered. There was no weapon signature. Another officer interrupted sharply. Spatial collapse event detected at target coordinates. Cause? Unknown. Again. Unknown. Drax looked back toward the glowing network spreading across the solar system. And for the first time since entering human space, he felt uncertainty. In the Bastion nobody breathed. Then another Dominion ship disappeared. A cruiser this time. Gone instantly. No explosion. No warning. No survivors. Several analysts physically recoiled from their screens. General Kane stared openly now. My God. Dr. Vey's face had gone pale. It's working, he whispered. His voice sounded almost disbelieving. It's actually working. Reyes never looked away from the tactical display. Maintain firing sequence. Across the solar system, ORPUS units shifted positions with machine precision. The network moved like a living intelligence. Not centralized. Distributed. Adaptive. Thousands of independent machines functioning as one weapon. Another Dominion vessel vanished. Then another. Then another. The red fleet markers began disappearing one by one across the tactical display. Drax forced himself to think. Panic killed commanders faster than enemy fire. Trace the origin point, he ordered sharply. The tactical officers obeyed immediately. Seconds later. There is no single origin. What? The distortions originate from coordinated network intersections across thousands of positions simultaneously. Drax understood instantly. Distributed attack architecture. Not one weapon. Thousands. His tactical mind processed the implications with horrifying speed. You could not destroy a centralized target. Because there wasn't one. All ships concentrate fire on the network units. The Dominion fleet responded instantly. Massive energy weapons ignited across space. Blue-white beams tore through the darkness. ORPUS units exploded by the dozens. Tiny machines vaporized instantly under Dominion firepower. The network count dropped rapidly. And still the attack continued. Another Dominion cruiser vanished. Then a carrier. Then one of the great dreadnoughts disappeared from existence so suddenly that multiple Dominion ships nearly collided trying to avoid the empty space it left behind. The bastion shook faintly beneath thunderous human cheering. People who had spent 11 years preparing for extinction suddenly realized humanity might survive. General Kane looked toward Vey. What exactly does ORPUS do? Vey stared at the disappearing alien fleet markers silently for several long seconds. Then finally answered. It removes things. Kane frowned. Removes them where? Vey did not answer immediately, because the truth sounded insane even now. Finally. Elsewhere. On the Eternal Dominion, Dract watched another warship disappear. 34 ships remaining. Then 33. Then 32. The fleet's disciplined formation began tightening instinctively. Dominion crews trying to survive something they could neither see nor understand. Dract stared at the glowing network ahead of them, and finally understood the true horror of humanity's weapon. Humans had not built a stronger fleet. They had built a different kind of war entirely. Fleet Commander Rael Dract had fought in 4 conquest campaigns. He had seen planetary shields collapse beneath sustained bombardment. He had watched entire fleets burn themselves apart trying to resist Dominion formations. He had defeated species larger than humanity, smarter than humanity, more advanced than humanity. But he had never seen war behave like this. Because war was supposed to make sense. Ships exploded. Weapons fired. Defenses failed. There were rules. Physics. Predictability. ORPUS ignored all of them. Another Dominion cruiser vanished from the tactical display. No explosion. No wreckage. Just absence. Fleet count. The answer came immediately. 30 ships remaining. 10 ships gone in less than 8 minutes. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. And yet Dract kept his voice calm. Because panic spreads downward through command structures faster than disease. All vessels continue suppressing the network, he ordered. The fleet obeyed instantly. The darkness between planets erupted with Dominion weapons fire. Heavy plasma lances. Directed energy batteries. Long-range particle streams. Hundreds of ORPUS units died under the assault. Small machines vaporized by overwhelming alien firepower. The network count dropped steadily. And still, the system adapted. The surviving units redistributed automatically across the solar system, repositioning faster than Dominion targeting solutions could update. Dract watched the movement patterns carefully, then understood the second terrible truth. ORPUS was learning. Not true intelligence perhaps, but adaptive coordination. Every Dominion tactic improved the network's responses. Every attempt to escape refined the machine behavior. Humanity had not built static defenses. They had built evolution. On Earth, the Bastion Command Center had transformed completely. The silence was gone now. People moved rapidly between stations. Officers shouted calculations. Engineers monitored synchronization rates. The giant tactical display updated continuously as Dominion ships disappeared one after another. General Kane stared at the battle in disbelief. They can't stop it. Reyes remained focused. Not yet. Dr. Vey adjusted firing patterns across the ORPUS lattice. The Dominions adapting faster than simulations predicted. Can they break through? Kane asked. Vey hesitated. Not if the network holds above operational threshold. And that threshold is? Vey checked the display. Approximately 1,100 active units. Kane looked back toward the tactical map. The count still showed over 2,500. The Dominion fleet was running out of ships long before humanity ran out of weapons. Around the world, humanity watched the battle unfold live. In cities, shelters, military bases, underground transit stations. Billions of people stared at giant screens showing alien warships vanishing across the solar system. At first nobody understood what they were seeing. Then realization spread slowly. Humanity was winning. The emotional shift was almost physical. Fear transforming into disbelief. Then hope. Then something far more dangerous. Confidence. A woman standing inside a crowded shelter in Berlin whispered quietly. They came all this way. A little boy beside her finished the sentence while staring at the screen. Just to lose. Back in space, Fleet Commander Dract made the decision he had hoped to avoid. Break formation. Several officers looked up sharply. Dominion battle doctrine depended on formation integrity. Overlapping shields. Coordinated fields of fire. Mutual defense coverage. Breaking formation meant vulnerability. But staying clustered together inside ORPUS engagement geometry was suicide. The fleet split instantly into smaller tactical groups. 30 surviving warships scattering across multiple vectors through the solar system. And for 23 seconds, the disappearances stopped. The command deck relaxed slightly. Then the network adapted. The ORPUS units repositioned with terrifying speed. Thousands of tiny machines moving through space like particles inside a living nervous system. The distributed attack lattice reshaped itself around the new Dominion vectors. And the vanishings began again. A destroyer disappeared first. Then 2 carriers. Then another dreadnought. Dract watched the tactical display update. 26 ships remaining. The younger officers looked shaken now. One tactical analyst whispered something under his breath. Dract heard it anyway. We're losing. The command deck became dangerously quiet. Because nobody in the Dominion military said those words aloud. Ever. Not after 172 victories. Not after 8,000 years. But the analyst was correct. They were losing. Dract stared at Earth through the main viewport. The small blue world turned silently beneath scattered clouds. Calm. Patient. Waiting. And suddenly he understood humanity's message perfectly. This is not hostility. It is a warning. Not arrogance. Not bluffing. A warning. Humanity had genuinely tried to stop the fleet from advancing. Because humans already knew what would happen if they did. Tactical, Dract said quietly. Yes, Fleet Commander? What are the probabilities now? The officer hesitated before answering. Current fleet survival projection. Silence stretched across the command deck. Say it. 12%. Several officers visibly stiffened. The number felt unreal. Dominion fleets did not lose. They certainly did not face extinction-level losses against pre-interstellar species. And yet the tactical calculations remained brutally clear. Every minute cost them another ship. Every attempt to counter the network failed. Dract closed his eyes briefly. Then reopened them. Open a channel to all captains. The fleet-wide transmission activated instantly. Faces appeared across the tactical display. Dominion commanders watching him carefully. Waiting. Dract stood perfectly still. Then spoke with absolute clarity. Humanity prepared for us. Silence. They knew an empire like ours would eventually arrive. Another ship vanished behind him on the tactical display. No one reacted anymore. They were becoming numb to it. Dract continued. This weapon system was not built quickly. Not built in fear. Built deliberately. Another pause. Built patiently. He looked directly into the transmission field. We are no longer facing a primitive civilization. The words hit harder than any battle report. Because they represented something almost unthinkable. The Dominion had misjudged an enemy. Badly. One captain finally asked the question haunting every surviving officer. What are your orders, Fleet Commander? Dract looked toward the shrinking fleet display. 24 ships left now. ORPUS units still numbering above 2,000. The math was merciless. For the first time in his military career. Rail Dract spoke words no Dominion commander had uttered in centuries. Prepare retreat vectors. The command deck froze. Even the machines seemed quieter afterward. Retreat. Not tactical repositioning. Not strategic withdrawal. Retreat. Defeat given voice. Far beneath Earth. Director Amelia Reyes heard the Dominion retreat preparations being detected across the tactical network. And for the first time since the invasion began, she allowed herself a very small smile. The retreat order spread across the Dominion fleet in stunned silence. Not confusion. Not disobedience. Because Dominion fleets did not retreat. They advanced. Always. For over 8,000 years, every military doctrine, every academy lesson, every tactical simulation inside the Carvax Empire had been built around a single assumption. The Dominion wins. Yet now 24 surviving warships were turning away from Earth at full acceleration. Running. Fleet Commander Rail Dract stood motionless on the command deck while the fleet reorganized into retreat formation. Drive output maximum, he ordered calmly. Escape vectors plotted. The surviving ships obeyed instantly. Great engines ignited brighter across the darkness. The fleet surged outward toward the edge of the solar system. Toward safety. Toward home. And for the first time since the battle began, hope appeared on the command deck. A tactical officer looked up from his station. Fleet separation increasing successfully. Another officer added quickly. ORPUS engagement frequency slowing. Dract watched the tactical display carefully. The disappearances had stopped. For nearly 40 seconds now. A lifetime compared to the rest of the battle. Perhaps distance was disrupting the network. Perhaps the human weapon required stable geometry. Perhaps. Fleet Commander. The sensor officer's voice had changed. Drax turned immediately. What is it? The officer swallowed hard. The network units. He zoomed the tactical display outward. Thousands of red ORPUS markers were moving now. Not randomly. Not defensively. Purposefully. Ahead of the retreating fleet. Drax stared at the display. Then slowly understood. They're intercepting us. No one spoke. Because the implications were horrifying. The machines were mobile. Not stationary defenses. Not mines. Hunters. 24 Dominion warships pushed harder toward escape velocity. An ORPUS moved faster. The network spread outward through the solar system like a tightening net. Every Dominion heading adjustment was mirrored instantly by machine repositioning. Every acceleration was countered. Every possible escape lane closed one after another. Tactical analysis, Drax ordered. The calculations ran for 30 agonizing seconds. Then the officer answered quietly. At current relative movement rates. He hesitated. Say it. There is no escape vector. Silence crushed the command deck. No escape. The phrase felt unreal. Dominion fleets crossed galaxies. Conquered civilizations. Survived wars spanning centuries. And now, they were trapped inside a single solar system by a species that had never fought beyond its own star. Drax stared at Earth on the long-range display. Still calm. Still beautiful. Still turning quietly beneath white clouds. Humanity had prepared for this. Not emotionally. Not desperately. Systematically. For years. Maybe decades. Maybe longer. And suddenly Drax realized the most dangerous thing about humans was not ORPUS. It was patience. On Earth, the Bastion Command Center watched the retreat attempt unfold. General Kane exhaled slowly. They're trying to run. Yes, Reyes replied. Do we let them? The room became quiet instantly. Because everyone understood the true weight of the question. If the fleet escaped, the Dominion would learn. Adapt. Return stronger. Understand ORPUS. Prepare countermeasures. Humanity might survive today only to die later. Dr. Elias Vey stared silently at the tactical display. He already knew what Reyes was thinking. She had considered this scenario for 11 years. Every outcome. Every consequence. Every moral line. Reyes folded her arms behind her back. If even one ship escapes, she said quietly, the next fleet arrives prepared. Kane nodded slowly. And if none escape? Reyes looked toward the shrinking Dominion fleet. Then the galaxy learned something different. The tactical display updated. 22 ships remaining. ORPUS units continued repositioning around them with terrifying precision. Like wolves circling wounded prey. Dr. Vey finally spoke. The network can complete full containment in 8 minutes. Nobody responded immediately. Because humanity was standing at the edge of something irreversible. For thousands of years humans had imagined alien invasions. Prepared for extinction. Feared becoming victims. But now humanity held absolute power over another civilization's survival. And that realization frightened some people more than the invasion itself. Deep on the command deck of the Eternal Dominion, officers watched the ORPUS net close around them. Another cruiser vanished. 21 ships remaining. Then 20. Then 19. The disappearances resumed faster now. The moving network no longer needed stable attack geometry. It adapted while in motion. Drax understood the mathematics instantly. The battle had already ended. The fleet simply had not stopped existing yet. One of his younger officers finally lost composure. What are these humans? No one answered him. Because no one knew anymore. The Dominion had expected primitives. Instead they had encountered hidden megastructures, impossible physics, distributed machine warfare, strategic patience beyond comprehension, and worst of all, humans had built all of it while pretending to be weak. Drax walked slowly toward the viewport. The stars reflected across the glass around him. 18 ships left now. He thought about the Hall of Victories back on Carvax Prime. 172 names carved into black stone. Every conquered species believing itself unique before defeat. The Dominion had always assumed history moved only one direction. Outward. Forward. Conquering. But history had just done something impossible. It had pushed back. A communications officer approached carefully. Fleet Commander, long-range transmission window to Carvax Prime remains open for another 4 minutes. Drac nodded once. Prepare final report. The officer froze slightly at the wording. Final. Drac activated the transmission channel himself. The recording field opened before him. For a moment he simply stared into it silently. Then, Supreme Commander Valor Crass. Another ship disappeared behind him on the tactical display. We engaged humanity in the Sol system. Pause. We were wrong. The words echoed across the silent command deck. We believed humanity technologically primitive. Another pause. They are not. Drac looked toward the moving ORPUS network surrounding the fleet. They prepared for us long before we arrived. A destroyer vanished. 17 ships left. The enemy weapon utilizes coordinated spatial manipulation across distributed machine architecture. Current countermeasures ineffective. His voice remained calm, professional, controlled, even now. But everyone listening could hear the truth beneath it. The Dominion was experiencing fear for the first time in centuries. Drac finished quietly. Do not underestimate this species again. Then the tactical display flashed. Another ship disappeared. And another. The command deck lights dimmed beneath emergency power redistribution. The ORPUS network had fully closed the trap. Humanity was no longer defending Earth. Humanity was hunting. The Dominion fleet died slowly. Not because ORPUS lacked power. Because humanity wanted certainty. Every escape vector was sealed. Every movement anticipated. Every tactical adjustment countered before it fully formed. The surviving Dominion ships scattered desperately through the outer solar system while thousands of ORPUS units moved around them like a living storm. 16 ships became 12. 12 became 9. 9 became 6. Each disappearance looked exactly the same. Space folded briefly. Reality distorted. Then another Dominion vessel simply ceased to exist. No explosions. No debris. No funerals. Only absence. Fleet Commander Rail Drac stood alone near the center of the command deck while officers around him continued fighting a battle they all understood was already over. Shield collapse on the left flank. Drive synchronization failing. ORPUS units repositioning again. New distortion spike detected. Another ship vanished. 5 remaining. Drac barely reacted now. Not because he lacked emotion. Because his mind had moved beyond survival. He was trying to understand humanity before the end came. That mattered more. Outside the viewport, thousands of distant machine lights moved across darkness in coordinated patterns. Beautiful. Terrifying. Precise. He thought about how long humans must have worked in secret to build this. The mining operations. The hidden launches. The concealed manufacturing. The lies. An entire species quietly preparing for war while pretending to remain weak. The realization chilled him more than the battle itself. Humanity had weaponized deception on a civilizational scale. A communications officer turned slowly toward him. Fleet Commander. Drac looked over. We are no longer receiving signals from the support group. How many ships? The officer checked again. Then answered quietly. 3. 3 ships left. Out of 40. The command deck lights flickered. Somewhere deep inside the Eternal Dominion, emergency systems struggled to compensate for damage and power redistribution. The surviving crew worked with absolute discipline despite everything. No panic. No screaming. Dominion training remained intact even at the edge of annihilation. Drac respected them deeply for that. A tactical officer suddenly looked up sharply. Network movement pattern changing. Drac approached immediately. The ORPUS units were tightening formation around the remaining ships. Compressing inward. The hunt entering its final phase. They're hurting us, an officer whispered. No one corrected him. Because that was exactly what humanity was doing. On Earth, the Bastion Command Center had become strangely quiet again. Not from fear. From awe. The tactical display showed only 3 remaining enemy vessels now. 3 red markers surrounded by thousands of white ORPUS units. General Kane stared at the screen silently. 40 ships, he murmured. Reyes nodded faintly. Humanity only needed one system. Dr. Elias Vey remained seated at the ORPUS control interface. His face looked exhausted now, emotionally drained. The adrenaline of survival had faded, leaving only reality behind. Thousands of lives were disappearing out there. Enemy lives. Still lives. He finally spoke softly without looking up. They thought they were predators. Reyes answered quietly. So did we once. The room understood exactly what she meant. Human history was full of empires, conquerors, invaders. Species like the Dominion were not alien to humanity. They were familiar. Human civilization had survived thousands of years of violence precisely because humans understood monsters very well. Sometimes because they had been monsters themselves. A young analyst suddenly spoke from the far side of the command room. "Director." Reyes turned. "We're intercepting internal Dominion communications." "Audio?" "Yes." The analyst hesitated. "They're saying goodbye to each other." Silence spread slowly through the bastion. Nobody celebrated after that. Because suddenly the enemy felt real again. Not invincible warships. Not faceless conquerors. People. Afraid people. Far beyond Earth orbit, the final 3 Dominion ships accelerated desperately toward the edge of the solar system. Orpheus moved faster. Dract watched the intercept calculations appear one after another across his tactical display. No escape. No survival probability. No remaining strategy. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion had reached a battlefield where victory was impossible. The realization should have broken him. Instead it brought strange clarity. He activated the fleet-wide emergency channel connecting the final ships. The surviving captains appeared one by one. Tired, shaken, but composed. Dominion officers to the end. Dract looked at them carefully. "We were taught the Dominion could never lose," he said quietly. No one interrupted. "We were wrong." Another silence. Then one captain asked the question all of them were thinking. "What happens now?" Dract looked through the viewport toward distant Earth. The small blue planet barely visible beyond the stars. Then he answered honestly. "Now the galaxy learns humanity exists." No speeches followed. No dramatic declarations. Just understanding. The kind born only in moments where history changes direction forever. Suddenly the tactical display flashed violently. One of the remaining ships vanished instantly. 2 left. A warning siren rolled across the Eternal Dominion. Spatial distortion forming. Where? Directly ahead of us. Space itself twisted in front of the flagship. Reality bending inward like dark water spiraling toward an invisible drain. Dract stared at it calmly. So this was how it ended. Not with explosions. Not with glorious final battle. But with disappearance. A weapon so terrifying because it erased certainty itself. No bodies. No wreckage. No proof. Only silence. The communications officer looked toward him one final time. "Fleet Commander." Dract gave a slow nod. The officer understood. Final transmission authorization. The channel to Carvax Prime reopened briefly. Static filled the connection. Dract spoke calmly into it. "Supreme Commander." The distortion outside grew larger now. "Hungry. Beautiful. We believed humanity weak because they lacked conquest." Another pause. "That was our mistake." Warning lights intensified across the command deck. Crew members held their stations anyway. Professional to the end. Dract finished quietly. "Humans do not survive because they are the strongest species." The distortion reached the hull. "They survive because they prepare longer than everyone else." Then the Eternal Dominion vanished. One final Dominion ship remained alone in the darkness for exactly 11 seconds afterward. Then humanity erased that one too. The transmission from Fleet Commander Rail Dract reached Carvax Prime 8 days later. By then, the fleet was already gone. Supreme Commander Valor Krass stood alone inside the Chamber of Victories when the message arrived. The great black hall remained silent except for the faint hum of ancient lighting systems above the golden names carved into stone. 172 civilizations. 172 victories. And beyond them, empty space waiting for another name. Krass activated the transmission himself. Static crackled softly. Then Dract appeared. Damaged lighting. Emergency alarms. The visible strain on officers behind him. And something else. Something Krass had never seen in a Dominion commander before. Uncertainty. "Supreme Commander." The recording flickered. "We engaged humanity in the Sol system." Krass watched silently. "We were wrong." The words echoed through the vast chamber. Not because they were loud. Because they were impossible. Krass replayed the sentence once in his mind. "We were wrong." Dract continued speaking. Fragments of battle data flashed across the holographic recording. Ships disappearing. Spatial distortions. Impossible machine networks. Human tactical patterns. The fleet dying piece by piece. Krass watched without moving. Without breathing. Without blinking. Then came the final words. Humans do not survive because they are the strongest species. Static rolled across the image. They survive because they prepare longer than everyone else. The recording ended. Silence returned to the Chamber of Victories. Absolute silence. For a long time Valor Crass did not move. The old commander simply stood there surrounded by the names of conquered civilizations while a truth older than the Dominion itself settled slowly into his mind. The Empire had finally found something different. Not merely another enemy. A civilization built by survival itself. Humans had not defeated the Dominion through superior numbers. Not superior ships. Not superior power. They won because they understood fear better than the Dominion ever could. Humanity expected monsters to arrive from the stars someday. So they prepared. For 11 years. Quietly. Patiently. Without glory. Without celebration. They prepared because survival mattered more to them than pride. And now 40 Dominion warships no longer existed. Crass slowly turned toward the final empty section of black stone on the wall. Space reserved for humanity's name. The 173rd Conquest. His eyes rested there for several long seconds. Then slowly, very slowly, he deactivated the carving authorization. The chamber lights dimmed faintly around him. No new name would be added. Not this time. A sound behind him broke the silence. One of the younger council officers had entered quietly during the recording. The officer looked pale, shaken. Supreme Commander. Crass did not turn around. How many surviving signals? None. The answer echoed softly through the chamber. No survivors. No wreckage. No returning ships. An entire Dominion battle fleet had simply vanished into silence. The young officer swallowed nervously. What are your orders? For the first time in centuries. Valor Crass did not answer immediately. Because every possible answer felt dangerous. Invade again? With what confidence? What if humanity possessed larger networks? Hidden fleets? More impossible weapons? What if ORPUS was only one layer of Earth's defenses? The Dominion suddenly knew almost nothing about the species they had tried to conquer. And that uncertainty frightened him more than military defeat. Crass finally looked back toward Earth's holographic image still floating faintly above the chamber table. The small blue world rotated silently, peacefully, as if it had not just erased 40 warships from existence. Cancel all expansion operations toward Sector 14, Crass ordered quietly. The young officer stared at him in shock. Entirely, Supreme Commander? Yes. But, humanity attacked a Dominion fleet. Crass finally turned toward him. No. His voice remained calm. We invaded their home. The officer fell silent instantly. Crass walked slowly toward the chamber exit. Then stopped once more beside the Wall of Victories. 172 names. All proof of Dominion superiority. Until now. Because now the wall represented something else. Limits. And somewhere far beyond Karvak space. Humanity was still out there. Watching. Preparing. Waiting. Crass spoke one final sentence before leaving the chamber. A sentence no Dominion leader had ever spoken before. Do not provoke the humans again. Far across the galaxy, Earth continued turning beneath its white clouds and blue oceans. Cities rebuilt. People returned home. Children went back to school. Factories reopened. Life continued. Officially, Project ORPUS did not exist. Most humans would never know how close extinction had come. But deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Director Amelia Reyes stood alone inside the Bastion Command Center watching the final battle recordings in silence. General Kane entered quietly behind her. It's over, he said. Reyes looked at the frozen tactical display. 40 vanished enemy warships. Thousands of ORPUS units drifting silently through dark space. Then she asked the question still haunting her. Do you think they'll come back? Kane considered it carefully. Eventually. Reyes nodded faintly. Humanity had survived today. But survival was never permanent. Humans understood that better than anyone. Dr. Elias Vey approached from the lower command level carrying a small data tablet. The ORPUS recovery teams are already repositioning the network. Reyes looked toward him. How long until the system is hidden again? 3 months. Kane exhaled quietly. And after that? Vey answered calmly. After that? He looked toward the stars displayed above the command center. We start building the next version. Silence settled across the bastion. Not fearful silence. Determined silence. Because humanity had learned the most important lesson in its entire history long before aliens ever arrived. The universe was not safe. It never had been. And humans? Humans survived by preparing for the day monsters finally came out of the dark.